The soft hum of a jukebox blended with the gentle clatter of forks against ceramic plates. Oakwood Diner, a cozy roadside spot nestled between a tire shop and a vacant storefront, glowed warm under its vintage neon sign. The red letter O buzzed intermittently, flickering in and out like a tired heartbeat. Jack Miller sat in the worn leather booth closest to the window, a steaming mug of black coffee in front of him. Across the table, his 4-year-old daughter Emily swung her legs freely above the floor. She wore her favorite yellow overalls dotted with oil smudges from earlier when she'd insisted on helping Daddy fix Mrs. Henderson's truck. The scent of maple syrup and sizzling bacon hung in the air while Emily carefully lined up sugar packets like toy soldiers, her little brow furrowed in concentration. Jack couldn't help but smile. These Friday nights had become their tradition, the reward after a long week of greasy knuckles and aching joints from working at the small garage he owned on the edge of town. For him, it was a breath of peace. For Emily, it was pure magic. Chocolate chip pancakes, whipped cream mustaches, and a waitress named Betty who called her sweetheart and snuck extra marshmallows in her hot cocoa. The bell above the door jingled, and Jack instinctively glanced up. Old habits from his Marine days still flickered like embers in the back of his mind. 3 men stepped in. Something about them didn't fit the rhythm of the place. Leather jackets, one with a torn sleeve, another with a faded snake tattoo slithering up his neck. They didn't take a seat. Instead, they scanned the room with eyes too sharp for comfort. Jack's gaze narrowed, but he quickly turned back to Emily, not wanting to startle her. She was now trying to build a tower from tiny creamer cups. "Hey, Daddy, do you think stars can see us from up there?" Jack chuckled. "I think they can, baby." Emily nodded solemnly. "Then I hope Mommy's star is really bright tonight." His smile faltered just a breath. He reached across the table and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Me too." Betty arrived with their food, setting down a short stack of pancakes for Emily and a plate of hash and eggs for Jack. "Your usual. And don't worry," she whispered with a wink toward Emily. "I slipped her extra syrup." "Thanks, Betty." Jack's voice was warm, but his eyes kept drifting to the 3 men now standing at the counter, speaking to the cashier in low tones. One of them leaned too close. Jack noticed the cashier's discomfort. So did Betty, her smile fading as she glanced toward the counter. Outside, a cold wind swept leaves down the sidewalk. Through the window, the town of Oak Ridge looked peaceful. But inside the diner, tension settled like a draft under the door. Then she entered. A young woman no more than 30 stepped in hesitantly. She wore a plain blue dress, her dark hair pulled into a simple ponytail. She looked like someone trying not to be seen, eyes darting, posture guarded. Jack didn't know what made him notice her so sharply. Maybe it was the way her hands clutched her purse strap. Maybe it was how she immediately turned to leave only to be intercepted. The 3 men moved fast. One blocked the door, another took a step too close. The third spoke something low that made her flinch. Emily had stopped eating. Her big brown eyes were wide and fixed on the scene. She tugged gently at Jack's sleeve. "Daddy, Daddy, can we help her?" The words, soft as they were, landed like thunder. Jack looked at his daughter. The little girl who believed stars could see her, who believed pancakes were sacred, who believed in kindness because he had taught her that the world, though often broken, could still be beautiful. He turned back toward the 3 men. Time slowed, his heartbeat steady, not fast, not fearful, but focused. For years he had left behind the uniform, the noise, the violence. He had chosen a quiet life for Emily, but something stirred now. Not rage, not pride, purpose. He rose from the booth. The vinyl seat let out a small hiss of air, as if the very atmosphere recognized the shift. Emily watched silently, hands now still, her fork dropped unnoticed. Jack Miller, a former Marine sergeant mechanic by trade, father by calling, walked slowly toward the door where 3 wolves had cornered a lamb. The diner hushed. The only sound was the low hum of the jukebox in the corner playing an old Johnny Cash tune at about walking the line. Jack didn't speak yet. He stopped a few feet away, standing between the woman and the men. His eyes calm, voice quiet but edged with steel. "She doesn't want trouble." The man with the snake tattoo smirked. "Ain't looking for trouble, Pops. Just having a conversation." "You should mind your own pancakes." Jack didn't blink. "My daughter asked me a question. I intend to answer it." The air changed. Snake tattoo reached toward his waistband but froze as Jack's hand moved first. Not for a weapon. He simply adjusted his stance. feet apart balanced. The kind of stance you only learn from years in combat zones. Please, the woman behind him whispered. That did it. Jack's voice dropped even lower. You're going to walk out of here now, all three of you, and you're going to forget you ever saw her. The silence was louder than any shout. Then slowly one of the men backed away. The second followed with a curse. Snake Tattoo glared, but Jack didn't flinch. Finally, he spat on the ground and stormed out. The bell above the door jingled again, and just like that, the danger passed. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the woman exhaled, trembling. Thank you. Her voice cracked. Jack nodded once. Then without another word, he turned back toward Emily. She looked up at him with eyes shining like her mother's. Daddy, you're my hero. He didn't reply, just ruffled her hair, sat down and picked up his fork. But he knew deep down everything had just changed. The snow had started falling by the time Jack tucked Emily into bed that night. Their small cabin sat at the edge of Oak Ridge, backed by quiet woods and fronted by a gravel drive leading to his modest auto shop. Warm light glowed from the front porch lantern, casting long shadows across the porch swing where Emily loved to nap in summer. Inside, the world was safe. Still. But in Jack's chest, the storm had already begun. He stood in the hallway, hand braced against the doorframe, watching Emily sleep. She had curled into her blanket, hugging her stuffed elephant, Mr. Trunks. Her breath was slow and even, her brow relaxed, a picture of peace. But the question she'd asked, just 6 simple words, echoed louder than any war cry he had heard in combat. Daddy, can we help her? It hadn't been a plea. It was a statement of belief. Belief in him and the world he had tried so hard to build for her, a world where kindness mattered, where right and wrong still held their lines. And when he looked at her in that diner, so small and so sure, he knew he didn't have the luxury of staying on the sidelines anymore. He had taught Emily to be brave, not by yelling, not by preaching, but by showing up, fixing what was broken, listening more than speaking. But sometimes being brave meant standing up even when you'd rather disappear. The next morning broke cold and sharp. Frost kissed the edges of the garage windows as Jack flipped the sign to open. The air smelled of gasoline and pine, and the sound of distant crows echoed over the trees. He poured himself a cup of weak diner-style coffee and checked the schedule. Just 2 oil changes and a busted alternator. A quiet day, or so he thought. The rumble came first, deep, even powerful. Not the sputter of an old pickup or the whine of a rusted sedan. This was something else. 3 Rolls-Royce Phantoms pulled slowly into the gravel lot, their polished black exteriors gleaming even in the pale morning sun. The contrast was so stark it almost looked like a mirage. Luxury amidst the dust and snow and cracked concrete. Jack put down his coffee, wiping his hands on a rag. The first car's door opened, and out stepped the woman from the diner. But today she was a different person entirely. Gone was the nervous girl in the blue dress. In her place stood a woman in a snow-white pantsuit tailored to perfection. Her dark hair was pinned neatly at her neck, and diamond studs shimmered just beneath her ears. She radiated calm confidence and power. Emily, who had followed Jack out in her puffy coat and rainbow rain boots, whispered, "Is she a princess?" The woman's eyes softened at the sight of the child. "No, sweetheart, not a princess, just someone very grateful." Jack stepped forward slowly. "You clean up nice." She laughed, a clear, effortless sound that danced in the cold air. "And you're just as direct as I remember. I like that." She extended a hand. "I'm Olivia Blackwell. My family owns Blackwell Motors." Jack didn't shake her hand right away. The name rang familiar. Blackwell Motors wasn't just any company. It was the 3rd largest luxury automotive group on the East Coast. Prestigious, powerful, and very far from Oak Ridge. Olivia let her hand fall, sensing his caution. "I didn't tell you who I was last night because I didn't want anyone to treat me differently. But what you did, what your daughter reminded you to do, meant more than I can say. I just did what anyone should have done." Jack's tone was flat but not cold. "That's where you're wrong. Very few people would have stood up, even fewer with a child sitting beside them." He paused. "Why are you here to say thank you properly? And 3 Rolls Royces are required for that." Jack gestured to the cars where drivers waited patiently. Olivia smiled again, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. "They're not for show. I'm under surveillance. The men you saw last night, they work for a rival company. I'm in the middle of a legal and business war, and last night I walked into a trap." Jack's jaw clenched. They were trying to intimidate me, she continued. Force me to back out of a deal that would bring a manufacturing plant to this region. Jobs training programs. It's a big move and not everyone wants it to succeed. And you came here to offer me a job. It wasn't a question. I came here to ask if you'd be willing to partner with us, Olivia said. I need service partners across the region. Reliable local mechanics, people with integrity. He stared at her, blinking against the cold wind and the sheer audacity of the moment. I'm a small-town grease monkey with a 4-year-old in a 2-lift garage. And I'm a CEO with 3 cars and a debt of gratitude, she said gently. Don't sell yourself short. Behind him, Emily tugged at his hand. Can we help more people, Daddy? Olivia's smile turned wistful. Smart girl. Jack looked between them, his daughter's trusting eyes, Olivia's poised calm, and felt something shift in him, an old part of himself stirring. Not the soldier, not the mechanic, but the man who once believed he could build something better. Let me think about it, of course, Olivia replied. But I'll be back tomorrow, and I'd love to bring you both to Blackwell HQ just to see what this could mean. She turned to leave her heels crunching lightly in the gravel. The 3 phantoms pulled away one after the other, disappearing down the snowy road like black swans fading into mist. Jack stood still for a long moment. Emily slipped her hand into his. Was that the girl from the diner? Yeah. Jack's voice was soft. But she's more than I thought. Emily nodded sagely. I think you're more than you think too, Daddy. Jack smiled, eyes glistening just a little. Yeah, kiddo, maybe. Jack had always known how to read a room. In war, it had saved lives. In the garage, it helped him tell when a client was bluffing about how long their check engine light had been on. But that night at the diner, he hadn't needed to read the room. He had felt it, like a pressure drop before a storm. Now, a full day later, he sat alone at his workbench, oil-stained hands idle, staring blankly at a disassembled carburetor he'd rebuilt a dozen times over. The gentle click of the wall clock was the only sound, and even that seemed loud in the stillness. He should have been exhausted. The garage had been busy after Olivia's visit. Word had spread fast in a town like Oak Ridge. Emily had spent the afternoon drawing race cars and asking if Miss Olivia could come back for pancakes. But Jack's mind was elsewhere, back in that booth in that moment, hearing his daughter's voice just before everything shifted. Daddy, can we help her? He hadn't expected to stand. He hadn't planned to act. The Marine inside him, buried under years of grease and grief, had simply stepped forward like an old friend who hadn't forgotten his post. And when he did, the room had changed. He remembered the exact way each of the 3 men looked at him, not with fear, but with recognition. A knowing, a measure of caution only shown to those who had seen the same darkness they trafficked in. And he hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't needed to. He had learned long ago that strength didn't come from volume. It came from certainty, stillness, and the willingness to stand between danger and the innocent no matter what it cost. The sound of the front door creaking open brought him back. He looked up. Olivia Blackwell stepped into the garage this time without the entourage or the armored vehicles. Just her, a fitted gray trench coat, boots that clicked softly on the concrete, hair pulled back in a low twist. She looked normal, elegant but quieter somehow. Jack stood and wiped his hands with a cloth. You're early. She glanced at the dusty clock. 15 minutes. I was curious if punctuality still mattered in a place like this. It does, just not as much as trust. Olivia nodded. Good answer. He gestured toward a folding chair near the workbench. She sat without hesitation, crossing her legs. He noticed the faint crease between her brows, less polished than yesterday, more human. You look tired, not unkindly. She gave a quiet laugh. You try negotiating with board members while dodging corporate espionage and hiding bruises from security threats. Jack didn't smile. I have, actually, just in a different uniform. They sat in silence for a beat. I looked you up, she said finally. Jack Miller, honorable discharge, Marine Sergeant, served 3 tours, lost your wife 3 years ago to cancer, moved here to raise your daughter alone, opened this garage with your military pension. He didn't flinch, and I realized I was right about what you don't belong here. He turned slowly. I chose to be here. Olivia's voice softened. I don't mean it as an insult. I mean that your life has outgrown this garage, whether you see it or not. Jack looked around at the dented toolbox, the faded calendar, the wall of photos. Emily's drawings taped beside pictures of his unit from another lifetime. I don't need more. Olivia leaned forward. Maybe not for you, but what about for her? That hit. Not like a punch, more like a ripple spreading through calm water. He said nothing. She continued, "This isn't just about a business proposal, Jack. I want your garage to become a hub part of a regional network of service centers for Blackwell Motors. But more than that, I want to use this partnership to launch a veteran job program. I want you to help me lead it." He blinked. "You want me to run a corporate veterans initiative? I want someone who knows what it means to serve, who doesn't just talk about loyalty, but lives it." Jack leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. "You don't know me. I know enough," she said gently. "You put yourself between me and danger without knowing who I was. That's the kind of person I want building something with me." Silence fell again, heavier this time. He thought of Emily, of the way her small hand fit into his, of her laugh, her trust. He thought of the men at the diner and how easy it had been for them to threaten someone who was simply trying to build something better. And he thought of Olivia, how behind the calm exterior he could now see something else: weariness, grit, and an odd flicker of hope. "I don't want to be anyone's hero." His voice was quiet. "Good," Olivia replied, "because I don't need a hero, I need a partner." He looked at her then, really looked, past the polished image, past the press releases and company logos. She wasn't some cold CEO. She was a woman trying to make something good in a world that often rewarded the opposite. And for the first time, Jack let himself consider the idea that maybe, just maybe, his quiet life wasn't the finish line. Maybe it was the starting point. Later that night, after Olivia had gone, Jack sat with Emily in the backyard, wrapped in blankets under a sky full of stars. She rested her head on his shoulder. "Daddy, you sweetheart, are we going to help her again?" Jack stared at the night sky, the stars clear and sharp above them. "Yes, I think we are." Emily's smiled, eyes drifting closed. And for the first time in years, Jack Miller didn't feel like he was leaving something behind. He felt like he was walking towards something. The next morning began like any other. Sunlight filtered through the blinds in stripes, cutting across the kitchen table, where Emily sat swinging her legs and coloring on a flattened cereal box. Jack stood at the counter, brewing coffee, while the local radio played softly. The DJ's voice easy and familiar, like an old friend chatting about snowfall predictions and high school football scores. Emily looked up. "Daddy, can I bring Miss Olivia one of my drawings today?" Jack raised an eyebrow. "You planning on becoming her new designer?" Emily giggled. "No, I just want her to have something happy." He smiled, pouring her a glass of orange juice. "Then pick your best one." She held up a picture of a giant purple car with stars for wheels and a smiling stick figure behind the wheel. "This one, it's called Starlight Racer." "Perfect. Tell her it's a limited edition." The two of them shared a quiet breakfast, the kind that had become sacred in their little world, full of unspoken comfort and the rhythm of healing. Jack never rushed mornings. He knew how fragile peace was and how long it took to build it back after war, after loss, after love was gone. But today something tugged at the edges of that peace. By 9:00 a.m., Jack was in the garage tightening the serpentine belt on an old F-150 while Emily sat on the workbench humming to herself. The sound of tires on gravel interrupted the morning air, and Jack stood upright, wiping sweat from his brow with the edge of his sleeve. A sleek white town car rolled up, not flashy like the Rolls Royces from before, but polished, deliberate. The back door opened, and for the second time in 2 days, Olivia Blackwell stepped into his life. But this time she wasn't alone. A man followed behind her. Tall, trim, dressed in a navy coat, polished shoes, and a watch that cost more than Jack's entire toolkit. His smile was tight, too perfect. Jack's jaw flexed. "Mr. Miller," Olivia nodded warmly. "This is Andrew Pierce, my company's legal advisor and head of risk management." Pierce extended a hand. "Mr. Miller, a pleasure." Jack shook it, firm, brief, non-committal. "What brings you both to the shop?" Olivia looked poised, but her voice had a hint of tension. "I wanted to walk you through the preliminary partnership documents and give you a tour of the regional facility. Thought it would be better in person." "And him?" Jack asked, glancing at Pierce. She hesitated. "Insists on being thorough." Pierce smiled again, but this time it was colder. "Standard protocol when dealing with sensitive expansion plans. Miss Blackwell's safety and the company's reputation are our top priorities." Jack felt something twist in his gut. He didn't like the man, not because he wore money like armor, not even because he spoke with the smooth detachment of someone who had never changed oil in his life. No, Jack didn't like him because his instincts, the ones that had saved him in combat zones and back alleys, were screaming that this man wasn't just a lawyer. He was a handler. And Olivia, she looked like someone used to being handled. Still, Jack didn't react. He simply gestured toward the small office attached to the garage. "We can talk in there." Emily slipped off the workbench, trotting toward Olivia. "I made this for you." Olivia knelt down as Emily handed her the Starlight Racer drawing. Her face softened instantly. "It's beautiful. It's the fastest car ever," Emily whispered, as if it were a secret. "But only nice people can drive it." Jack caught the subtle glance Olivia gave Pierce. He saw a flicker of something unspoken. Resistance, maybe, or apology. Pierce remained outside the office, clearly uninterested in small talk or children's artwork. Instead, he pulled out his phone and turned slightly away, speaking into it with hushed intensity. Inside, Jack flipped through the partnership documents. They were well prepared, clean percentages, smart logistics, generous terms. Almost too generous. "You wrote this?" he asked. Olivia nodded. "I did. The corporate lawyers will add layers later, but I wanted you to see the heart of it first before it got complicated." Jack tapped a section. "Veteran training program." She leaned forward, her voice softer. "It's real. I've been trying to build something like this for years. A network of service centers that aren't just about cars, but about people. Skill building, second chances. You're the first person I've met who I actually trust to start it right." Jack studied her. "Then why bring him?" She hesitated. "Because trust doesn't scale. And in my world, everything is watched." Jack nodded slowly. "I'm not a liability, but I don't play political games either." Olivia exhaled. "I'm counting on that." Their eyes met across the desk. Something passed between them. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. A quiet understanding that they were both trying to build something honest in a world addicted to masks. Suddenly, the door burst open. Pierce stepped in, expression sharp. "We need to go, now." Olivia stood immediately. "What's wrong? There's been a breach back at headquarters. Someone accessed your personal files." Olivia paled. Pierce turned to Jack. "Don't worry, Mr. Miller. Just corporate security nonsense. We'll handle it." He started to usher Olivia out, but she paused, turning back to Jack. "I still want you to see the facility." "Tomorrow," Jack nodded. "I'll be ready." Emily waved from the corner. "Bye, Miss Olivia. Drive the racer safe." Olivia smiled, this time genuinely, and followed Pierce out. As the car disappeared down the road, Jack watched the dust settle. Something had changed. Olivia was clearly in deeper trouble than she let on. And Andrew Pierce wasn't just some lawyer. He was a man used to controlling situations. Jack had spent years following orders. But this time he wouldn't follow anyone blindly. Not even someone as compelling as Olivia Blackwell. Not when Emily's voice still echoed in his mind. Only nice people can drive it. The next morning, frost clung to the edges of the windshield like lace. Jack stood in the driveway brushing snow off his truck as cold biting through his flannel sleeves. Emily was still inside finishing her oatmeal and picking out which of her 20 plastic bracelets matched her coat best. He looked up at the sky, pale gray heavy. Snow was coming again. Jack's world had changed twice in as many days, and part of him was still trying to catch up. Not to the money or the opportunity or even the 3 black Rolls Royces that had turned his gravel lot into something resembling a movie scene. No, what stuck with him was Olivia. Not the way she looked, though there was no denying she carried a certain impossible elegance, but the way she spoke. There was steel beneath her composure, a woman who had learned how to wear calm like armor. And now he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever she was building, it was more than just business. By mid-morning, Olivia returned without Andrew Pierce. She pulled up in a silver electric coupe, sleek and quiet, and stepped out in jeans boots and a navy wool coat that made her look almost ordinary. Almost. Emily, who had been helping Jack sort bolts by size, her idea of fun, lit up the moment she saw her. Miss Olivia knelt just in time to catch the flying hug, laughing as Emily nearly bowled her over. "Someone's got strong muscles. I ate 3 bites of broccoli last night," Emily announced with pride. Well, then I'd better be careful. Olivia smiled, rising to greet Jack. Jack wiped his hands and walked over. You came alone. I figured it was safe, she said, unless you're secretly a spy mechanic with a trap door under your garage. Only on Thursdays. They shared a quiet smile. Olivia gestured toward the office. Can we talk inside? Jack led the way, gesturing for Emily to stay with her coloring. Inside, the little office still smelled faintly of motor oil and pine-scented cleaner. The heater hummed softly in the corner. Olivia sat across from him, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp. I need to tell you something, she said, and I need you to hear it all before you decide anything. Jack nodded, saying nothing. Olivia took a slow breath. Those men in the diner, they weren't just random thugs. They were sent by Victor Harrison, an old rival of my father's who's been trying to buy up every piece of Blackwell Motors since my father passed. I refused a buyout deal last month, and things have been escalating. Jack's jaw tightened. I've had break-ins threats. My legal team's been watching my back, but Andrew thinks I should step back. Sell. Protect myself. And you don't... No, she said firmly, because if I do, everyone we employ, hundreds of families, lose their security. I won't let that happen. I want to move forward with the expansion project, and I want you at the center of it. Jack leaned back, arms crossed. I'm not corporate, I know, Olivia said quickly. That's why I trust you. He blinked. I'm not offering you a promotion, she continued. I'm offering you a partnership. You'd keep your garage, but we'd invest in it. Upgrade the equipment, train new techs, turn this into a flagship site for veteran retraining. You'd mentor, oversee operations, get equity. Real ownership. Jack was quiet. Then why me? Because you're not after anything, she said. That's the rarest kind of person in my world. A long silence stretched between them. Outside the window, Emily twirled in the snow, pretending to be a ballerina mechanic, holding a wrench like a magic wand. Jack finally spoke. You realize if I say yes, I'm pulling myself and her into your fight. Olivia looked down. Yes. And you're still asking. Olivia met his gaze. Because I've seen what you are, Jack. You're a protector, a builder, and I can't do this alone. Jack stood pacing, a little jaw working. His mind darted between possibilities. Upgrades, expansion headlines, risk. Then he thought of Emily's voice. Maybe helping more people is right too. He looked at Olivia. You're not just talking about wrenches and oil changes. She shook her head. I'm talking about creating a model that shows the world veterans can rebuild just as fiercely as they once fought. Jack was quiet for a long time. Finally, he extended a hand. I'll do it, but we do it my way. Integrity first, no spin. Olivia stood and shook his hand firmly. Agreed. Their handshake held. Then Jack added, and I don't want Andrew Pierce within 10 miles of Emily. Olivia's expression shifted. Surprised but not offended. Understood. As she turned to leave, Emily ran up and tugged on Jack's sleeve. Daddy, did you help her again? He smiled, kneeling to her level. Yeah, sweetheart. I think I did. Emily looked at Olivia, then back at her dad. Good. She's nice, but she's a little lonely. Olivia blinked, surprised. Jack raised an eyebrow. That's so. Emily nodded. She needs a friend. I drew her a second picture, one with 3 people. Olivia reached out as Emily handed her the new drawing. A simple scene. A tall man, a woman in a coat, and a small girl holding both their hands under a bright yellow sun. Looks like you made me a family, Olivia whispered, throat tight. Emily smiled brightly. Everyone needs one. Jack and Olivia exchanged a glance. Something warm, something unspoken, something new. Outside, the snow began to fall again, but this time it felt like a beginning. Night had fallen over Oak Ridge like a thick quilt, soft, heavy, and quiet. Outside Jack's cabin, the woods stood still under a blanket of fresh snow, and the hum of the heater inside filled the silence like a low lullaby. A small fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting warm shadows that danced across the wooden floors. Emily was fast asleep on the couch, her bunny slippers still on her feet. A picture book about race cars splayed open across her chest, her hair curled around her cheek like a question mark. Her hand loosely clutched one of her newest masterpieces, a crayon drawing of what she called Daddy's dream garage. Jack stood in the kitchen staring at it. In her drawing, the garage was 3 times bigger, bright, clean, full of happy mechanics, one of whom wore a Marine Corps hat like his. There was a swing set off to the side, and in the corner a sign that read, Emily's Snack Shack, free cookies for heroes. He smiled, but the weight in his chest didn't lift. Olivia's proposal was still echoing in his head. Equity expansion, training programs, veteran support. She had laid out the vision with such clarity and heart that it was impossible not to be moved. But Jack knew better than most that visions always came with costs. He stepped out onto the porch with a cup of black coffee and let the cold slap him awake. This garage, this town, it had saved him after Rebecca passed. When the war inside him hadn't stopped just because he came home, it was these quiet nights and Emily's giggles that pulled him back. Starting over hadn't been about ambition. It had been about survival. Now here he was again, standing at another kind of crossroads. One path led to comfort, safety, predictability. The other to something bigger and riskier. He didn't fear change. What he feared was change that would take something away from Emily. Because at the end of it all, she was the only mission that mattered. The next morning, after pancakes and maple syrup, and Emily's very serious request that he wear the red plaid shirt because it makes you look like a boss, Jack took her to the garage early. The lot was quiet, blanketed in snow, but his mind was anything but. By mid-morning, he found himself standing at his workbench, staring at the same carburetor he hadn't finished rebuilding for 2 days. His hands moved automatically, but his heart wasn't in the bolts and valves. His thoughts were on what-ifs. What if this deal went south? What if Harrison's men came after him? What if the quiet life he'd built was a house of cards that would collapse under the weight of ambition? Daddy Emily stood in the doorway to the office, her hair a little messy, holding a peanut butter sandwich in one hand and her sketch pad in the other. Jack turned. "What's up, sweetheart?" She walked over and climbed onto the stool beside him. "You're being too quiet today," he chuckled. "Sometimes quiet helps me think." Emily nodded solemnly. "That's what Miss Betty says before she burns the toast." Jack laughed. "Well, I haven't burned anything yet." She tilted her head. "Are you thinking about Miss Olivia's big idea?" He paused. "I am. Are you going to say yes?" He sighed. "I don't know yet." Emily was quiet for a moment. Then she slid her sketch pad over to him. On the new page was a drawing of the two of them. He was holding a wrench. She was handing out cookies. Above them was a sign that read, "Helping makes hearts grow." Jack blinked. "Where'd you hear that? I made it up," she said proudly. "It just came out when I was drawing." He looked at her, the tiny freckles across her nose, the pure trust in her eyes. She didn't care about contracts or revenue or corporate risk. She just cared about people. "Daddy," she said quietly. Helping her was right. Maybe helping more people is right too. He looked down at the sketch again, and for the first time in hours, the tightness in his chest loosened. There would always be risk, always shadows in every new door. But maybe the point wasn't to avoid them forever. Maybe the point was to choose the shadows worth walking through, the ones that might lead to light. Jack nodded slowly. "You're right." Emily grinned as if that settled everything. Then serious again. "If we get a bigger garage, can I have my own cookie counter?" "We'll see," he said, tugging gently at her ponytail. But inside, a decision had already taken root. Not just about the business, about himself. For too long, he had defined safety as hiding from what hurt, from what might go wrong. But maybe growth, real growth, came from doing the hard thing anyway. That night, Jack stood in front of the mirror in his bedroom, staring at the man looking back. Not the tired mechanic, not the grieving husband, not even the former Marine. Just a father, a builder, a man who still had more to give. He picked up the old dog tags that hung from the nail beside the mirror. Worn, scratched, but solid, a piece of who he used to be. He wrapped them around his neck again. Not as a burden, but as a reminder. The phone rang. He answered on the second ring. "Miller," Olivia's voice came through, soft but hopeful. "Is this a bad time?" "Not anymore," he said. "I've made my decision." A beat of silence. "Then, and I'm in," Jack said. "Let's build something worth being proud of." Olivia exhaled like she'd been holding her breath all day. "You won't regret it. I'm not doing it for you," he added, but not unkindly. "I'm doing it because my daughter reminded me what kind of man I'm supposed to be." On the other end, Olivia was quiet, then her voice warmer. "She sounds like the best partner either of us could ask for." "She is," Jack said. Outside, the wind howled softly through the trees. But inside, the fire was steady, and the future, though uncertain, no longer felt like something to fear. The following week arrived like the first true morning of spring, crisp, promising, and full of the quiet thrill of something just beginning. Jack stood outside Blackwell Motors Regional Headquarters with Emily on his shoulders, her arms stretched out like airplane wings as she giggled at the sheer size of the place. The building stood tall and sleek, all glass and steel, glinting in the mid-morning sun. It looked like something from a magazine, too modern for Oak Ridge, too elegant for a man who still used paper invoices and kept his best wrenches in a metal coffee can. But Jack wasn't here to measure comfort. He was here to measure potential. Olivia met them on the front steps. She wore a tailored black coat over slacks, but this time her hair was loose, falling in soft waves past her shoulders. Less executive, more human. Emily immediately reached for her hand. "I brought cookies," Emily said proudly, holding out a brown lunch sack. Olivia grinned. "Are they from your snack shack?" "Yes," Emily said seriously. "Only heroes get them." Olivia's smile softened. "Then I'm honored." Jack watched them as they walked inside together, a woman who had inherited an empire and a girl who ruled with crayons and cookie crumbs. He shook his head slightly, the corner of his mouth lifting. Life had a strange way of pairing unlikely people. The tour began in the main showroom where a handful of glossy custom-designed Blackwell vehicles sat gleaming under pendant lights. Emily immediately pressed her nose to the glass of a cherry-red sports model. "This one goes zoom," she whispered. Olivia chuckled. "That's the Pegasus, 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds. Jack raised a brow. "Does it come with booster seats?" She laughed. "We can make that happen." From there, they moved into the operations wing, a hive of movement and quiet purpose. Engineers in lab coats adjusted engine specs. Designers clustered around 3D prototypes. Technicians moved silently through the maintenance base, running diagnostics with tablet screens and gentle precision. It was a far cry from the squeaky creepers and duct-tape toolboxes of Jack's garage. But as he watched a young technician carefully install a timing belt, he noticed something familiar. Focus, respect for craft, the unspoken pride in doing a job right the first time. "You've built something solid here," Jack murmured. Olivia nodded. "It's not just cars, it's people. Many of the folks here are from small towns like yours. Some are second chance hires. One of our best diagnostics guys was a homeless vet 2 years ago." Jack looked at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. She met his gaze. "It's not about building empires anymore. It's about building bridges." They ended the tour in a bright conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a wooded ridge. Coffee and pastries waited on the table. Emily curled up in a corner chair with her sketchbook while Jack and Olivia sat at opposite ends. Olivia pulled out a folder. "These are the preliminary rollout plans for the first 3 regional service centers. Oak Ridge would be our prototype. We'd expand slowly. Veterans first, then local youth apprenticeship programs." Jack flipped through the documents. The numbers were clean, the intentions clearer. But one line caught his eye. "Blackwell Foundation Training Oversight Coordinator, Jack Miller." He looked up. "You want me in charge? I want you leading," she said. "Not managing paperwork. I want you shaping it. I want kids to walk into that garage and see someone who knows what purpose looks like. Who's lived it." Jack leaned back in his chair, his eyes drifting toward the window. The snow was melting on the ridge, revealing patches of green beneath. Growth messy, slow, and inevitable. "I've never done anything like this," Olivia smiled. "Neither have I. Not like this. But I believe in this, and I believe in you." There was no flattery in her voice, just quiet conviction, the kind that couldn't be faked. Emily patted over and held up her newest drawing. "This is the new garage. There's a garden in the back now for people who are sad." Olivia took the drawing with care, her eyes misting. "That's beautiful." Jack glanced at his daughter. "She's got a heart bigger than her head." "She gets it from somewhere," Olivia said, not looking away. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't awkward. It was full. The kind of silence that only exists when two people realize they've crossed an invisible threshold. Not into business, not yet into love, but into trust. That evening, back at the cabin, Jack sat on the porch steps, his hands calloused and his mind restless. Emily was asleep inside, curled up with Mr. Trunks and dreaming of race cars and garden garages. He looked up at the sky. He'd been taught to see risk like a soldier, identify, assess, neutralize. But now he saw risk as something else, a bridge not between enemies, but between what was and what could be. 3 weeks later, the transformation began. Jack's modest garage buzzed with activity as contractors installed new equipment, diagnostic computers, hydraulic lifts, specialized tools that had only existed on his wish list before now. The Blackwell logo, sleek and understated, appeared on the front signage alongside Miller Edo, a visual promise of partnership, not takeover. Olivia had been true to her word. The contracts respected his autonomy while providing the resources he needed. Emily's cookie stand, now a proper kiosk, was built in the corner of the waiting area, complete with a small refrigerator and child-sized counter. When she saw it for the first time, her eyes grew wide as dinner plates, and she hugged Jack's legs so tightly he thought she might leave dents. The first group of veteran trainees arrived on a Tuesday morning, 5 men and 1 woman, all carrying the invisible weight that only those who had served recognized in each other. Jack stood before them in the newly renovated classroom section, feeling suddenly exposed. Teaching engines was one thing. Teaching people how to rebuild their lives was something else entirely. Mike Reynolds was the first to speak, a former Army Ranger with a beard that couldn't quite hide the scar running along his jaw. Why us? Why this program? There's plenty of job training out there that doesn't work. Jack didn't hesitate. Because we're not here to train you for fun. We're here to remind you that you already have skills. The military taught you to adapt to solve problems with limited resources, to keep pushing when everything in you wants to quit. I'm not teaching you. I'm just giving you a place to remember who you are. Sarah Chen, former combat medic, crossed her arms. And Blackwell gets a nice PR boost out of our collective trauma. Jack nodded. Yeah, they do. And we get state-of-the-art equipment certifications that actually mean something in the industry and guaranteed job placement. I'm not asking you to trust a corporation. I'm asking you to trust me, one vet to another. If this is bullshit, I'll be the first one to walk. The room fell silent. Then James, the oldest of the group, a Vietnam veteran who'd struggled with homelessness, gave a single solemn nod. Seems fair enough. Just like that, the program began, not with fanfare, but with cautious determination. Days blended into weeks as Jack settled into a new rhythm. Mornings meant elementary school drop-offs for Emily, then straight to the garage to prepare for the day's training. Afternoons were split between regular customers. He refused to abandon the locals who had supported him from the beginning, and the specialized training modules Olivia had helped design. Carlos, the youngest of the group, had a natural talent for electrical systems, but struggled with the patience required for diagnostics. Sarah approached each task with surgical precision, but avoided working with the other trainees. Mike kept to himself, often disappearing during lunch breaks, returning with red-rimmed eyes. James moved slower than the others, but never made the same mistake twice. Jack watched them all, adjusting his approach with each person. Firm with Carlos, respectful of Sarah's boundaries, quietly vigilant with Mike, patient with James. In their broken places, he recognized his own journey back from the edge after Rebecca died. In their small victories, he found a satisfaction deeper than any he'd known since becoming a father. Emily became the unexpected heart of the operation. She appeared after school each day, dispensing cookies and unsolicited advice with equal enthusiasm. The trainees, hardened by war and struggle, softened around her. Even Sarah, who rarely smiled, kept a special chocolate chip cookie in her toolbox. Emily's prescribed emergency happiness medicine. One evening after the trainees had gone, Jack found Olivia standing in the empty garage, running her fingers along a newly installed diagnostic screen. My father would have loved this, she said quietly. He started as a mechanic, you know. Before he built Blackwell, he always said he never felt more honest than when he was fixing engines. Jack leaned against a workbench, wiping grease from his hands. Why didn't you tell me that before? Olivia turned moonlight from the high windows catching in her hair. Because I didn't want it to seem like sentimentality. This is business, but it's also personal. Harrison knew that about my father too. That's why he's so determined to take this company apart. He offered me twice market value last month, with the condition that I dismantle the foundation programs my father started. Jack studied her face. You turned down a fortune to keep a promise to a ghost. Olivia's eyes flashed. Not a ghost, a legacy. There's a difference, Jack nodded slowly. Then let's make sure it was worth it. The first threat came 3 days later. Jack arrived early to find the garage door spray-painted with a single word, sellout. He had it cleaned before any of the trainees arrived, but the message lingered in his mind. Someone was watching. Someone didn't like what was happening here. He didn't mention it to Olivia. She had enough battles to fight in the corporate boardrooms. This was his territory to defend. The second warning was less subtle. A formal letter from the town zoning commission, suddenly questioning whether the garage's new activities violated local ordinances. The timing was too convenient to be coincidence. Jack took the letter to his old friend, Police Chief Robert Davis. Robert whistled low as he read it. This has Harrison written all over it. He's got connections everywhere, even in a town this small. What are you mixed up in? Jack explained the partnership, the training program, and the transformation of his modest garage into something that might actually make a difference. Robert listened, his weathered face unreadable, until Jack finished. You know I'm always in your corner, but you're swimming with sharks now. These corporate types, they don't fight fair. They hire people who make problems disappear. I'm not exactly a stranger to combat, Jack reminded him. Robert leaned forward, elbows on his desk. Different kind of war. In this one, the enemy wears suits and smiles at your daughter while planning to burn everything you care about to the ground. Just watch your six. And maybe install some security cameras. Jack took the advice. That night, he mounted surveillance equipment at every corner of the garage, connected to an alert system on his phone. As he worked, Mike unexpectedly appeared, offering to help. I know a thing or two about perimeter security. Mike said, his voice casual, but his eyes constantly scanning. Did 3 tours as a combat engineer before Rangers. Jack handed him a drill without comment. For the next 2 hours, they worked in companionable silence, each recognizing in the other the heightened vigilance that never quite leaves a soldier's system. When they finished, Mike stepped back, surveying their work. Anyone who tries to mess with this place is in for a surprise. His voice was flat, but there was something underneath, a flicker of the same protective instinct Jack had felt at the diner. The following week, the program hit its first major obstacle. Andrew Pierce arrived unannounced during a training session, accompanied by 2 Blackwell board members, an older man with steel gray hair and a younger woman whose expression suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. Jack had just finished demonstrating an advanced diagnostic technique when Pierce's voice cut through the garage. Impressive setup, Mr. Miller. I see our investment is being put to good use. The veterans tensed collectively in automatic response to the intrusion. Jack wiped his hands slowly, deliberately, giving himself time to assess the situation. Mr. Pierce, this is unexpected. Pierce smiled thinly. Just a routine check-in. The board is naturally interested in how their $5 million is being spent. He gestured to his companions. Mr. Hendricks chairs our finance committee. Ms. Lawson oversees community initiatives. Jack nodded to them both, noticing how Hendricks's gaze swept dismissively over the veterans, while Lawson seemed genuinely interested, already moving toward Sarah's workstation. Pierce continued, his voice pitched to Carrie. We're particularly concerned about metrics. How many of your participants do you expect will be employment ready within the original time frame? Our projections suggest a rather high dropout rate for programs of this nature. The implication hung in the air. Jack felt rather than saw Mike stiffen, saw Carlos's knuckles whiten around the wrench he held. These were proud men and women being discussed as statistics, as problems to be solved. Before Jack could respond, James stepped forward, his back military straight, despite his 60-plus years. Sir, with all due respect, you're standing in the presence of over 40 years of combined service to this country. We didn't drop out of war. We won't drop out of this. The garage fell silent. Pierce's smile never wavered, but his eyes hardened. Admirable sentiment. But sentiment doesn't satisfy shareholders. Lawson, who had been examining Sarah's meticulous engine work, turned around. Actually, Andrew, if the quality I'm seeing here is any indication, we might need to revise those projections upward. This is exceptional work, Hendricks frowned. One success doesn't make a program, Alexandra. Jack had heard enough. This isn't a petting zoo, gentlemen, ma'am. My trainees aren't here for your entertainment or inspection. If you have questions about the program, Olivia hasn't all the documentation. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to do. Pierce's face flushed. Miss Blackwell doesn't own this company outright. Mr. Miller, she answers to the board, and the board has concerns. Then the board can schedule a proper meeting. Jack's voice remained level, but there was an edge to it now. The same tone that had silenced the men at the diner. During business hours, not in the middle of training. Hendricks raised an eyebrow, clearly unaccustomed to being dismissed. Pierce opened his mouth to protest, but Lawson touched his arm lightly. He's right, Andrew. This isn't the appropriate venue. Her smile at Jack was brief, but genuine. We'll be in touch through proper channels, Mr. Miller. Thank you for the impromptu tour. As they left, Jack felt a collective exhale from the veterans. Carlos let out a low whistle. Man, I thought you were about to throw down with Sue Guy. Jack shook his head. Not my style, but I won't let anyone treat you like your charity cases either. Now, where were we? They returned to work, but the atmosphere had shifted. Something had solidified among them, a sense of shared purpose, of common ground. Jack noticed Sarah working alongside Mike for the first time, showing him a more efficient approach to the electrical system they were diagnosing. James was patiently explaining carburetor basics to Carlos, who for once was actually listening. That night, Olivia called, her voice tight with controlled anger. I just heard about Andrew's visit. I am so sorry, Jack. He had no right. Jack shifted the phone, watching Emily color at the kitchen table. It's fine. We handled it. It's not fine. He's undermining me, trying to make you look unprepared. Hendricks has been pushing to sell to Harrison for months. If they can prove this program isn't viable, they'll use it against me at the next board meeting. Jack paused, considering his words carefully. Maybe we should give them something they can't argue with. What do you mean? Let me come to the next board meeting. Bring some of the trainees. Show them what we're actually doing, not what Andrew says we're doing. Olivia hesitated. Board meetings can be brutal, Jack. These people eat facts and figures for breakfast. They don't care about personal stories. Then we'll give them numbers too. Certification progress, skill assessments, projected employment. Timelines. But they need to see the people behind the spreadsheets. That's the only way this works. The line went quiet for a moment. Then, okay. The meeting's next Thursday. I'll set it up. After they hung up, Jack sat at the table beside Emily, who pushed a crayon toward him without looking up. You look like you need to color Daddy. It helps when you're thinking too hard. He smiled, accepting the purple crayon. That obvious, huh? Emily nodded wisely. Your forehead gets all scrunchy, like when the sink was leaking and you said those words I'm not supposed to repeat. Jack laughed, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. He began coloring absently on the edge of Emily's paper. Just simple geometric shapes, nothing artistic. His mind was already building a strategy for the board meeting, weighing which trainees would make the strongest impression, what data would be most compelling. Emily studied his purple squares with critical concentration. You're worried about Miss Olivia. It wasn't a question. Jack looked at his daughter, constantly amazed by her perception. A little bit. Some people at her company don't like our garage project. Emily frowned, adding yellow sun rays around one of Jack's squares, transforming it into something brighter. But we're helping people. That's good business. Jack stared at her. Out of the mouths of babes, as Rebecca used to say. Good business. That was exactly the angle they needed. The board meeting preparation consumed the next week. Jack selected Mike and Sarah to accompany him, Mike for his technical brilliance, Sarah for her precision and professionalism. They spent evenings after training, compiling data, practicing responses to potential questions, even discussing appropriate attire. Jack found himself unexpectedly emotional watching these warriors prepare for a different kind of battle. One fought with words and presence rather than weapons. On the morning of the meeting, Emily insisted on making good luck cookies for everyone. She carefully packed them in individual bags labeled with each person's name, including special ones for the board people with extra sprinkles, so they remembered to be nice. Jack wore the only suit he owned, the one from Rebecca's funeral, now slightly too loose from years of physical labor. Sarah arrived in a crisp pantsuit that transformed her from mechanic to executive in an instant. Mike had cut his beard and wore a tie that couldn't quite hide his discomfort, but his eyes were clear and determined. They met Olivia at Blackwell headquarters 30 minutes before the meeting. She looked different today, armor-plated in an impeccable gray suit, hair pulled back severely, expression carefully neutral. But when she saw them, something in her face softened. Thank you for doing this. Her voice was quiet, meant only for Jack. He nodded once. Let's show them what real investment looks like. The boardroom intimidated by design. All dark wood and leather windows overlooking the city skyline, a massive table that separated power from supplication. 12 people sat waiting. Andrew Pierce prominently positioned near the head of the table. Jack recognized Hendricks and Lawson from their garage visit. The others were strangers, but their expressions ranged from bored to skeptical to openly hostile. Olivia took her seat at the head of the table. Jack, Sarah, and Mike remained standing just inside the doorway until she gestured them forward. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, the Blackwell Veterans Initiative is now in its second month of operation. I've asked the program director, Jack Miller, to provide you with a first-hand report. Pierce interrupted immediately. Before we begin, I must register my objection to this unusual approach. Board meetings are typically restricted to executives and shareholders, not contractors. An older woman with silver hair and piercing blue eyes looked up from her tablet. Mr. Pierce, I believe Miss Blackwell still has authority to invite relevant parties to present on their areas of expertise. Unless you're suggesting we make decisions about a $5 million investment without hearing from the person managing it. Pierce's jaw tightened, but he fell silent. The woman nodded to Jack. Please proceed, Mr. Miller. I'm Victoria Blackwell, Olivia's aunt and the company's longest-serving board member. We're interested in substance, not ceremony. Jack stepped forward, placing his materials on the table. For the next 20 minutes, he presented the program's progress with straightforward precision, certification timelines, skill development, metrics, kitball versus benefit analyses. He introduced Mike and Sarah, who each spoke briefly about their military experience and what the program had provided that other veteran initiatives lacked. As they spoke, Jack watched the board members' faces. Some remained impassive, others showed growing interest. Lawson was openly supportive, nodding at key points. Hendricks still looked doubtful, but was at least paying attention. Only Pierce maintained his dismissive expression, occasionally whispering to the man beside him. When they finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Hendricks leaned forward. Impressive presentation, Mr. Miller. But let's be honest, this is a drop in the bucket. 6 veterans in a small town garage. How does this scale to justify the investment? It was the question Jack had been waiting for. That's exactly why we're here. This isn't just about 6 people in Oak Ridge. It's about creating a replicable model. These 6 trainees will become mentors for the next group. Within 2 years, we project 15 operational centers across the region, each training 20 veterans annually. And the financial return? Another board member asked. Jack looked him directly in the eye. Sir, Blackwell Motors spends approximately $30 million annually on service centers staffed by technicians you have to constantly recruit and retain in a competitive market. This program creates loyal, highly skilled technicians who have already proven they can perform under pressure. They're not just employees. They're ambassadors for your brand in communities across the country. Communities filled with potential customers who value companies that support veterans. Victoria Blackwell's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. You're suggesting this is as much a marketing strategy as a social program. Jack nodded. I'm suggesting it's good business, not charity. Our first 6 trainees will be fully certified within 3 months, half the time we initially projected. Blackwell gets first pick of exceptional talent while building community goodwill and customer loyalty. Pierce scoffed. This all sounds very inspirational, but the reality is that these programs rarely deliver on their promises. Veterans face significant challenges reintegrating into civilian workforce environments. Sarah stepped forward, her voice measured but firm. Mr. Pierce, with respect, I performed emergency surgery in active combat zones with limited supplies and under enemy fire. I believe I can handle diagnostic software and customer service without your concern. A ripple of surprised laughter moved through the room. Even Hendricks cracked a smile. Mike, who had been silent since his introduction, spoke next. Sir, you're right that veterans face challenges. That's precisely why this program works where others fail. Mr. Miller understands those challenges because he's lived them. He's not teaching us to fit into your world. He's showing us how to bring our strengths into it. The atmosphere in the room shifted perceptibly. Jack could feel the momentum building. Then Pierce made his move. This is all very touching, but there's another matter the board should consider. He slid folders across the table. We've received concerning information about Mr. Miller's garage. Apparently, there have been security incidents, vandalism threatening calls. Harrison Industries has expressed concern that our partnership puts Blackwell at risk of being associated with potentially escalating violence. Jack felt his stomach tighten. He hadn't told Olivia about the spray paint or the anonymous calls. How did Pierce know Olivia's expression remained neutral, but her knuckles whitened around her pen? This is the first I'm hearing of these incidents, Mr. Miller. Jack met her gaze steadily, because they were minor and handled. A bit of graffiti, a couple of hang-up calls. Nothing worth escalating. Pierce pressed his advantage. Nothing worth mentioning to your partner. Or perhaps nothing you wanted on record. The fact remains that this program has already attracted negative attention. Harrison's concerns about safety and liability are valid. Jack's patience snapped. Harrison's concerns. The same Harry who sent men to threaten Miss Blackwell in a public diner. Forgive me if I find his sudden interest in our safety suspicious. A murmur ran through the board members. Victoria Blackwell's eyes sharpened. What men? What threat? Olivia intervened. There was an incident before the partnership began. Mr. Miller intervened in a situation involving me and some individuals who may have been connected to Harrison. It's how we met. Pierce leaned back, a satisfied smile playing at his lips. So this entire program, this $5 million investment, stems from a personal debt of gratitude. How very sentimental, Olivia. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Jack watched Olivia's face, saw the moment when something in her snapped. Not toward weakness, but toward absolute clarity. My father built this company from nothing, Andrew. She stood slowly, her voice low but carrying to every corner of the room. He started with one garage, not unlike Mr. Miller's. He believed that business had a responsibility to the communities it served. That profit without purpose was hollow. This program isn't sentimental. It's strategic. It builds skilled workforce, creates brand loyalty, and fulfills our corporate social responsibility in one initiative. If you can't see the value in that, perhaps you are on the wrong board. Pierce's smile vanished. The veiled threat hung in the air. He wasn't just questioning the program anymore. He was challenging Olivia's leadership. Victoria Blackwell cleared her throat. I believe we've heard enough for today. Mr. Miller, Sergeant Reynolds, Lieutenant Chen, thank you for your presentation. The board will discuss this matter privately now. As they were escorted out, Jack caught Olivia's eye one last time. She gave him the smallest of nods. Not defeat, not victory, just acknowledgement of the battle they joined together. Outside the boardroom, Sarah exhaled sharply. That Pierce guy is a piece of work. Mike nodded. He's not just opposed to the program. He wants Olivia out. Jack remained silent, his mind racing through the implications. Pierce knew details he shouldn't have known. Someone was feeding him information, and there weren't many possibilities for who that could be. The drive back to Oak Ridge passed in tense silence. Jack dropped Mike and Sarah at the garage, promising to update them when he heard anything. Then he headed straight to Robert's office at the police station. Robert listened grimly as Jack detailed the meeting and his suspicions. When Jack finished, Robert leaned back in his creaking chair. You think you've got a mole? Someone feeding information to Pierce who's feeding it to Harrison. Jack nodded. Has to be. The only people who knew about the graffiti were me, you, and whoever did it. Robert's expression darkened. I don't like what you're implying, Jack. I'm not implying anything about you. I'm saying someone's watching my garage more closely than I realized. Could be one of the contractors who installed the equipment. Could be someone in town with connections to Harrison. Robert sighed, rubbing his face. I'll make some discreet inquiries, but Jack, you need to think about what you're up against here. Men like Harrison don't play by any rules. If this program threatens him, somehow he won't stop at board meetings and spray paint. I know. Jack stared out the window at the sleepy main street of Oak Ridge. That's what worries me. Emily's already lost one parent. I can't let her lose another. Robert studied his old friend. Is that what this is really about? You getting cold feet about sticking your neck out? Jack turned, eyes flashing. I don't get cold feet, but I don't take unnecessary risks with my daughter's safety either. Robert held up his hands. Easy, Marine. I'm on your side. All I'm saying is if you're going to fight, fight to win. Don't go halfway and leave yourself exposed. These corporate wars, they're not so different from the other kind. The guy who hesitates is the guy who loses. Jack nodded slowly. Then I won't hesitate. That night after tucking Emily in, Jack sat on the porch with his phone in hand staring at Olivia's number. He hadn't heard from her since the meeting. Whatever was happening in that boardroom afterward, she hadn't shared it. Finally, he pressed call. She answered on the first ring, her voice thick with exhaustion. Jack. He cut straight to the point. Someone's feeding Pierce information. We need to figure out who. I know who. Her voice was flat. Andrew has an arrangement with one of Harrison's security people. I found the payments buried in some files Victoria helped me access after the meeting. Jack processed this. So he's been working against you from inside all along. Yes, the board is divided. Victoria and 3 others support me. 4 firmly support Andrew, who's been laying groundwork for months to position himself as a better steward of the company than the founder's daughter. The rest are waiting to see who wins. Harrison's timing isn't coincidental. He smells blood in the water. Jack leaned back, staring at the stars. What do you need from me? A beat of silence. Then I need you to keep the program running exactly as promised. No delays, no excuses. I need success. I can point to proof that my vision works. And what about Pierce Harrison? I'll handle Pierce. Harrison is trickier. He has powerful friends, Jack. This isn't just about business for him. My father beat him decades ago, took a contract that made Blackwell what it is today. Harrison's been waiting for revenge ever since. Jack thought about Emily's words, her simple childlike belief that helping people was good business, about Robert's warning not to hesitate, about the veterans who were finally finding their footing again. I'm not backing down, Olivia, but we need to be smarter, more strategic. Her voice warmed slightly. That's why we make a good team. The conversation shifted then, moving from strategy to something more personal. They talked about the small victories at the garage. Carlos finally mastering the diagnostic system, James mentoring a local teenager interested in engines, Sarah designing a modified tool setup for a trainee with a hand injury. They talked about Emily's latest drawings, about Olivia's memories of her father's original garage. By the time they hung up, something had changed between them. A deepening of connection forged in shared purpose and mutual respect. Not quite romance, but the foundation for something that could become it if they let it. The following morning, Jack arrived at the garage earlier than usual, intending to review the security footage from the past week. He was surprised to find Mike already there, methodically checking each of the cameras they'd installed. Couldn't sleep. Mike shrugged when Jack questioned him. Figured I'd make myself useful. Jack recognized the restlessness in the younger man's movements, the hypervigilance that often accompanied PTSD. Rather than comment on it, he simply handed Mike a coffee from his thermos and joined him in the review. They worked in companionable silence until Mike suddenly stilled the footage. There, Tuesday night, 2:17 a.m. On the grainy screen, a figure in a dark hoodie approached the back door of the garage, tested the handle, then retreated after noticing the camera. The face was never clearly visible, but something about the movement pattern caught Jack's attention. Play it again, he requested. Mike rewound the footage. They watched 3 more times before Jack spotted it. A distinctive limp in the right leg, barely noticeable but familiar. I know that walk, Jack muttered. Where have I seen it? Before they could investigate further, Siyum. The rest of the trainees began arriving for the day's session. Jack filed the observation away, determined to return to it later. For now, there was work to do. Lives to rebuild, skills to sharpen, a program to prove viable. As the day progressed, Jack found himself watching his trainees with new eyes, not just assessing their technical progress, but looking for signs of who they were becoming beyond the garage. Sarah, who had barely spoken to anyone in the beginning, was now explaining a complex electrical system to 2 local high school students who had stopped by out of curiosity. Carlos had developed a system for organizing tools that even Jack had to admit improved workflow. James had become the quiet heart of the group, his steadiness calming the others on difficult days. And Mike? Mike was still a riddle. Brilliant with engines, vigilant to the point of paranoia about security, but distant from the others. Jack had tried various approaches to draw him out, but the younger man maintained careful boundaries. Something was driving him beyond just learning a trade, but whatever it was, he kept it buried deep. The phone call came just as they were closing up. Olivia's voice was tight, controlled in a way that immediately put Jack on alert. The board voted. 6-6 with Victoria casting the deciding vote as senior member. The program continues, but with oversight. Andrew's been assigned as direct liaison. Jack processed this. He's being put in charge of us. Not exactly, you still report to me, but he has authority to audit, inspect, question. He'll be looking for any reason to shut us down, Jack. Any excuse to prove I was wrong. Then we don't give him one. Jack's voice hardened with resolve. When does this start? Tomorrow? He's coming to the garage for a full inspection. He's bringing the skeptical board members with him. Jack, this is it. Our one chance to prove this works. After hanging up, Jack gathered the trainees and explained the situation without sugarcoating it. Tomorrow would determine whether the program survived or died. Everything had to be perfect, not just the technical work, but the presentation, the attitude, the evidence of progress. Mike spoke first after Jack finished. So basically, we need to show these suits that we're worth keeping around. Jack nodded. They'll be looking for flaws, reasons to cut funding. We can't give them any. Carlos snorted. Man, if they're looking for flaws, they came to the wrong place. Broken is what we do best. The room fell silent. Then Sarah unexpectedly smiled. He's right. We're all damaged goods in one way or another. But damage doesn't mean worthless. James nodded slowly. When something breaks, you got two choices. Throw it away or fix it better than new. I've been thrown away enough in my life. I prefer the fixing option. Jack looked around at these warriors. Battered, bruised, but unbowed. Tomorrow wouldn't just be about budgets and metrics. It would be about proving that what appeared broken could become the strongest part of the machine. We start at dawn, Jack said finally. Every bolt, every tool, every inch of this place needs to shine. But more importantly, every one of you needs to remember why you're here. Not just for yourselves, but for every vet who might come after you if we make this work. As they left, Jack remained behind, moving through the garage, slowly seeing it through the critical eyes that would judge it tomorrow. The equipment was state-of-the-art, the trainees were progressing ahead of schedule, the business model was sound. But would it be enough against someone determined to find failure? His phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Whatever happens tomorrow, I believe in what we're building. Jack stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, so do I, and that's why we won't lose. The battle lines were drawn. Tomorrow would determine not just the fate of the program, but of everything Jack had come to believe in since that night at the diner. That second chances were possible, that broken things could be remade stronger, that the quiet life he'd built for Emily could expand to include purpose beyond survival. He glanced at the security monitors one last time before leaving the image of the limping figure still nagging at his memory. There was a connection there, something important he was missing. But that mystery would have to wait. Tomorrow's war demanded all his focus now. Jack locked the garage and stepped into the cool night air, determination settling over him like armor. They wanted a fight, fine. He'd give them one they wouldn't forget. Dawn broke over Oak Ridge with an unforgiving clarity, painting the garage in harsh relief against the pale morning sky. Jack had arrived before sunrise, reviewing their preparations one final time. Today wasn't just another inspection, it was Judgment Day. The veterans had transformed the space, not a tool out of place, not a speck of dust on the diagnostic equipment, every detail meticulously planned. This wasn't just a workplace anymore. It was a fortress they were prepared to defend. Mike appeared first, dark circles under his eyes, suggesting he hadn't slept. When Jack asked, the former ranger just shook his head. Been reviewing those security tapes again. Something about that guy with the limp feels familiar. I can't place it, but it's bugging me. Jack nodded, filing the information away. Mike's hypervigilance was both a blessing and a concern. Since installing the security system, he'd become increasingly watchful, checking the cameras multiple times daily. Jack had noticed how Mike tensed whenever Harrison's name came up in conversation, his jaw tightening in a way that suggested more than just general distrust. Sarah arrived next, her usual ponytail replaced by a neat bun, wearing a pressed button-down shirt that couldn't quite hide the military bearing in her posture. Carlos and James followed shortly after, both uncharacteristically silent, both carrying the weight of what today meant. Emily had insisted on coming too. She wore her official helper apron over a blue dress, her hair in two careful braids Jack had fumbled through before breakfast. She took her position behind her cookie counter, arranging her treats with surgical precision. When Jack questioned whether she should be in school, She fixed him with Rebecca's exact, determined stare. They're coming to decide if our garage family gets to stay together. I need to be here. He couldn't argue with that logic. They arrived at precisely 10 a.m. Andrew Pierce leading the procession like a general surveying enemy territory. Behind him came Hendricks, two other board members Jack recognized from the meeting, and surprisingly, Victoria Blackwell herself. No Olivia. Jack felt her absence like a missing gear in a well-tuned engine. Emily spotted them first. They're here, Daddy. Remember to smile like you mean it. Jack squeezed her shoulder gently before stepping forward to greet the delegation. Welcome to Miller Auto and Blackwell Training Center. We're ready for your inspection. Pierce didn't bother with pleasantries. We'll need to see all certification progress records, financial expenditures, and training outcomes. I understand you've claimed accelerated timelines. Will require verification. Victoria Blackwell stepped forward, extending her hand to Jack. Mr. Miller, a pleasure to see your operation firsthand. Olivia speaks highly of what you've accomplished here. Jack shook her hand, noting the strength in her grip despite her age. Miss Blackwell, we appreciate the board taking time to see our work up close. Pierce didn't wait for further conversation. He moved into the garage, clipboard in hand, already making notes. Hendricks followed his expression, less openly hostile than at the board meeting, but still skeptical. Victoria lingered, her sharp eyes taking in details others might miss. She noticed Emily at the cookie stand. And who might this young entrepreneur be? Emily straightened to her full height of 3'8". I'm Emily Miller. This is my snack shack. Would you like a cookie? They're free for heroes and important visitors. Victoria's face softened. I would be honored. She accepted a carefully wrapped chocolate chip cookie, her eyes meeting Jack's over Emily's head. She has her father's directness. Jack nodded, a small smile breaking through his professional mask, and her mother's heart. The inspection began in earnest, Pierce interrogating each trainee about their progress, challenging their knowledge, scrutinizing every detail of the operation. Jack watched with carefully controlled anger as Pierce pushed harder than necessary, clearly hoping for mistakes, for cracks in the foundation. But the veterans were ready. Sarah walked Hendricks through the advanced diagnostic protocols she'd mastered weeks ahead of schedule. Carlos demonstrated modifications he'd designed to improve efficiency in the air filtration systems. James guided one of the board members through the meticulous documentation system he'd developed for tracking parts and labor. Mike, however, was the surprise. Where Jack expected his usual quiet intensity, the former ranger was articulate and poised, methodically explaining the security systems to Pierce himself. But Jack noticed the slight tremor in Mike's hands, the way he positioned himself to always maintain a clear line of sight to the exits. Something was off. 2 hours into the inspection, something unexpected happened. A tow truck pulled into the lot, hauling a luxury sedan with Blackwell insignia. The driver approached Jack, ignoring the board delegation. Got a direct call from headquarters. High-priority client needs immediate service. Car shut down on the interstate, won't restart. Computer says it's the new integrated system failure. They said you're the only center in 50 miles equipped to handle it. Pierce stepped forward. This is hardly the time. We're conducting an official inspection. The tow operator shrugged. Tell that to the CEO of Mid-American Banking, who's stranded with his family. Miss Blackwell specifically said to bring it here. Jack understood immediately. This wasn't coincidence. This was Olivia throwing them into the deep end to prove they could swim. A real-world test in front of the most critical audience possible. He turned to his team: Carlos Diagnostic Bay, Sarah Computer Systems, James Client Liaison, Mike Security Protocols. This is a priority vehicle. Let's move. The veterans snapped into action with military precision. Pierce and the board members found themselves witnessing not a rehearsed demonstration, but an actual emergency response. Jack guided them to a viewing area where they could observe without interfering. Victoria Blackwell's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Quite convenient timing. Jack met her gaze. Quality is best tested under pressure. For the next hour, the garage transformed into a synchronized operation that would have impressed any military commander. The veterans diagnosed a complex failure in the integrated circuit that controlled the vehicle's advanced driver assistance systems, a problem that typically required returning the vehicle to the factory service center. Without missing a beat, they implemented a field repair that wasn't even in the Blackwell technical manual. When they finished, Pierce could barely contain his frustration. This doesn't prove anything. One vehicle repair, however impressive, doesn't validate an entire program. Before Jack could respond, Victoria stepped forward. Actually, Mr. Pierce, it proves everything. These individuals just performed a level 4 system repair that our own technical division claims requires specialized factory equipment. They did it in under an hour, saving Blackwell Motors from having to explain to the CEO of our banking partner why we couldn't fix his car. Her expression remained neutral, but her voice carried unmistakable authority. The board authorized this inspection to determine whether Mr. Miller's program delivers measurable results. I believe we have our answer. Unless you'd like to explain to that banker why the people who just fixed his vehicle aren't qualified to train others to do the same. The other board members murmured in agreement. Even Hendricks looked impressed despite himself. Pierce realized he was losing ground. He shifted tactics. The technical aspects may be adequate, but there are security concerns. He pointed to the surveillance equipment. Excessive security measures suggest heightened risk. The reported threats against this facility pose liability issues for Blackwell. Jack felt his patience snap. Every piece of security equipment here was installed after your associate Harrison sent people to intimidate Miss Blackwell. If there's a security threat, it's coming from the man you're so eager to sell this company to. Pierce's face flushed. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Miller. Without evidence? Without evidence, it's just my word against his. Jack stepped closer. But here's something you can verify. Check who accessed the garage security footage from Blackwell headquarters last week. Only 3 people had that clearance: Olivia, the security chief, and you. Yet somehow details from that footage made it into your presentation to the board. Victoria's eyes sharpened. Is this true? Andrew Pierce straightened his tie. I was performing due diligence on our investment. By accessing secure files without authorization and sharing them with a competitor, Victoria's voice could have frozen flame. I believe that violates at least 6 provisions of your employment contract. The atmosphere shifted visibly. Pierce realized he'd walked into a trap. The other board members were watching him now, not the veterans. Hendricks took a step away from Pierce, distancing himself from whatever was unfolding. This is absurd. I've served Blackwell loyally for 15 years. I'm protecting the company from Olivia's emotional decision-making. Pierce's voice rose slightly, control slipping. Victoria glanced at Jack, something like approval in her eyes. She turned back to Pierce. The evidence suggests otherwise. We'll continue this discussion at headquarters, Andrew. For now, I believe we've seen enough of Mr. Miller's operation to make our determination. As the board members filed out, Victoria lingered behind. She approached Jack with the measured steps of someone who had navigated corporate battlefields longer than he'd been alive. Olivia didn't send that car, Mr. Miller. I did. Her mouth curved in a small smile. My brother would have appreciated your team's performance today. He always said the true measure of training isn't what people do when they're prepared, but what they accomplish when they're surprised. Jack absorbed this. You planned the whole confrontation with Pierce. Victoria's eyes twinkled. I've been watching Andrew circle my niece like a vulture for months. Needed the right moment to clip his wings. Your program provided the perfect opportunity. Will the board support continuing the program? Victoria nodded. Unanimously, I suspect, once certain personnel changes are implemented. Her expression turned serious. But be careful, Mr. Miller. Harrison doesn't lose gracefully, and he doesn't fight fair. Expect retaliation now that his inside man has been exposed. After they left, the veterans gathered in the suddenly quiet garage. Carlos broke the tension first, releasing a whistle between his teeth. Man, did you see that old lady take down suit guy? Like watching a sniper at work. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Pierce never saw it coming. None of us did. Mike remained silent, his eyes tracking the departing vehicles through the window. Only when they disappeared did he turn to Jack. This isn't over. Harrison won't stop just because his inside man got caught. His voice had an edge Jack hadn't heard before, not just caution, but something that sounded like personal knowledge. Jack studied Mike more closely. You sound like you know Harrison. Mike's eyes darted away. Not directly, but I know his type. Mike hesitated, then added, There's something I need to check on the security footage. The figure with the limp, I think I might know who it is. James, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. In Vietnam, we had a saying, winning one battle doesn't end the war, but it sure improves the odds for the next one. His weathered face creased in a rare smile. Today was a good battle, Jack. Emily approached, holding her nearly empty cookie tray. Does this mean our garage family gets to stay together? Jack lifted her onto his hip, ignoring the twinge in his back. It means we get to keep helping people, sweetheart. And that's always worth fighting for. The phone call from Olivia came that evening after Emily had gone to bed. Jack sat on the porch steps watching darkness settle over the trees when his cell phone lit up with her name. I just left the emergency board meeting. Her voice carried a lightness he hadn't heard before. Andrew's been terminated effective immediately. Victoria had evidence he'd been feeding information to Harrison for months. Jack leaned back against the porch post. Your aunt is a formidable woman. She's the best of us. Olivia paused. The board unanimously approved expanding the program, Jack. Full funding for 3 years with options to establish 10 additional training centers. They want you to oversee the entire Veterans Initiative. Jack absorbed the magnitude of the opportunity settling over him. That's a lot more than a small-town garage operation. It is. You'd need to travel, hire staff, develop curriculum. Olivia's voice softened. It would mean significant changes for you and Emily. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken questions. Finally, Jack voiced the one that mattered most. Why me, Olivia? There are people with corporate experience with degrees in this kind of thing. Because they know the theory, you know the truth. Her voice carried absolute conviction. Veterans don't need another program designed by people who've never served. They need someone who understands that rebuilding a life is different from building one from scratch. That's you, Jack. That's always been you. After they hung up, Jack remained on the porch, turning the opportunity over in his mind. The scope of it both exhilarated and terrified him. It meant stepping fully out of the quiet life he'd built, becoming visible in ways he'd avoided since leaving the service. It meant Emily would grow up differently than he'd planned. It meant risk. But it also meant purpose on a scale he'd never imagined. Not just helping 6 veterans in Oak Ridge, but potentially thousands across the country, creating a model that could change how America welcomed its warriors home. His thoughts were interrupted by Mike's truck pulling into the driveway, headlights cutting through the darkness. Mike stepped out, his movements tense, purposeful. He climbed the porch steps without a greeting. We need to talk. I know who's been watching the garage. Inside, Mike spread surveillance photos across the kitchen table. The figure with the distinctive limp appeared in several frames, barely visible in the shadows. His name is Thomas Reed, former Delta, then private contractor. He's Harrison's head of security. Mike's voice was flat, clinical, as if delivering a mission briefing. I served with him briefly in Afghanistan before he went private. Jack studied the grainy images. How certain are you? Mike met his gaze directly. 100%. And that's not all. He reached into his pocket and placed a small electronic device on the table. I found this under the main diagnostic computer. It's a remote access module, military grade. Someone's been accessing our systems, monitoring everything we do. Jack felt ice form in his veins. Harrison wasn't just trying to shut them down through corporate channels. He was gathering intelligence, planning something more direct. How long has it been there? Mike's jaw tightened. Based on the access logs since the expansion began. Someone came in with the construction crew. Jack's mind raced through the implications. The security cameras, the threatening graffiti, and now this active surveillance inside their facility. Harrison had been watching them from the beginning. Don't remove it yet. Let's use this. Jack pulled out his phone to call Robert, but it lit up with an incoming call from a blocked number. Against his better judgment, Jack answered, putting it on speaker. Impressive operation you have built, Miller. The voice was smooth, cultured, with the faintest edge of condescension. Victor Harrison, I presume. How did you get this number? A light chuckle came through the speaker. I make it my business to know everything about people who interfere with my plans. And you, Sergeant Miller, have become quite the interference. Jack kept his voice steady. What do you want, Harrison? Direct. I appreciate that. Harrison's tone hardened slightly. What I want is simple. Blackwell Motors. It should have been mine 20 years ago before Howard Blackwell stole my technology patents. His daughter is continuing in the family tradition of theft, stealing my market share with this veterans program publicity stunt. It's not a publicity stunt. Jack's grip tightened on the phone. No. Harrison's voice dripped with mock surprise. Then why is she preparing to announce a public offering next quarter, using the success of your program to boost the initial valuation? Did she not mention that part of her grand vision? Jack kept his expression neutral, aware of Mike watching him. Even if that's true, it doesn't change what we're accomplishing here. Noble sentiment. Harrison sighed theatrically. Unfortunately, nobility doesn't protect against reality. You've positioned yourself and your daughter in the middle of a war you don't understand, Miller. I'm offering you one chance to step aside, resign from the program, take a very generous severance package, walk away before things get uncomfortable. The threat hung in the air, all the more menacing for its vagueness. Jack felt a cold fury building in his chest. Are you threatening my family? I'm offering you an opportunity. Harrison's voice remained pleasant. Think about it. You have until tomorrow night. This could end with you wealthy and your daughter safe, or, well, let's not explore unpleasant alternatives. Jack watched Mike's face harden, saw his hand move unconsciously to where a sidearm would have been during deployment. He caught Mike's eye and gave a small shake of his head. We're not interested in your offers, Harrison. This program continues. There was a pause on the line. A shame. Then perhaps your star trainer would like to explain Operation Shadowfall to your veterans. I imagine they'd be quite interested to hear how Sergeant Reynolds froze during extraction, leaving 3 men to die. Mike went absolutely still, color draining from his face. Jack held up a hand, silencing whatever response might have come. We have your threats recorded, Harrison. We have evidence of your corporate espionage. It's over. A long pause followed. When Harrison spoke again, his voice had lost its cultured veneer. You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming. This evidence of yours will never see daylight. My lawyers will bury you in litigation until your grandchildren are old. Your precious program will die in committee meetings and budget reviews. And when you're forgotten, I'll still be here waiting to claim what's mine. The line went dead. Jack turned to Mike, who stood frozen, shame and rage battling across his features. He's bluffing, trying to throw us off balance. Jack's voice was steady, but his mind was racing. Mike shook his head slowly. He's not bluffing about Shadowfall. It was a classified extraction op 4 years ago. He paused, his eyes fixed on the table. We were pulling out a high-value target under heavy fire. I was point. When we hit the extraction zone, something happened. I froze. 7 seconds of nothing. By the time I came back online, we'd lost our position advantage. 3 men died covering our retreat. Jack absorbed this. 7 seconds. Mike looked up, his eyes haunted. 7 seconds of absolute nothing. No thought, no action, just gone. They classified it as combat stress reaction. Honorable discharge, full benefits, psychiatric evaluation. I've spent 4 years trying to outrun those 7 seconds. Jack held his gaze. We've all had moments we can't take back. What matters is what you do next. The next morning, Jack sent Emily to stay with Betty from the diner, a precaution that felt necessary after Harrison's veiled threat. Robert arrived at the garage with a cybersecurity expert from the state police. They documented the surveillance device, but left it in place, using it to feed carefully selected information back to Harrison. Jack called Olivia immediately after Harrison's threat. She arrived at the garage within an hour, her face pale with fury when Jack played the recorded conversation. I should have seen this coming. The IPO plans were confidential, only the board knew. He must have another source inside. Jack studied her face. You didn't tell me about the public offering. A flicker of guilt crossed her features. I was going to, after we secured the program's future. She paced the small office, frustration evident in her movements. It's not just about raising capital, it's about creating a corporate structure that can't be dismantled if something happens to me. Insurance for the program's future. Jack absorbed this, recognizing the logic even as he felt the sting of being kept in the dark. We need to end this, Olivia, not just defend against Harrison, stop him permanently. She nodded, determination replacing regret. I've been gathering evidence for months, financial records, witness statements from companies he's pressured. But it's not enough for criminal charges. He's too careful. Robert, who had been listening quietly, stepped forward. Maybe we don't need criminal charges. Maybe we just need leverage. His eyes gleamed with the cunning that had made him an effective small-town police chief for 20 years. If Harrison wants to play dirty, Let's see how he handles a taste of his own medicine. The plan came together over the next few hours, a trap designed to catch Harrison in the act of corporate espionage. Using the discovered surveillance device, they would feed false information about a new proprietary battery technology supposedly being developed at the training center. The bait would be irresistible to Harrison, who had been trying to enter the electric vehicle market for years. Victoria Blackwell provided the final piece of the puzzle: access to Blackwell's actual security protocols, which would flag any unauthorized attempt to access the fake data. If Harrison took the bait using the surveillance device his team had planted, they would have concrete evidence of industrial espionage. By dawn, everything was in place. The veterans maintained normal operations at the center, though each had been briefed and assigned specific roles if the situation escalated. Mike, despite the personal risk Harrison's revelations posed, insisted on being present. If he tries to use my past to hurt this program, I want to face him myself. I'm done running from it. Olivia remained at Jack's side throughout the day, both of them monitoring the security feeds for any sign of Harrison's response to the planted information. The hours stretched with excruciating slowness. By late afternoon, doubt began to creep in. Maybe he saw through it, Olivia said, pacing the small security office. Jack watched the monitor's instinct telling him to be patient. Harrison's ego won't let him ignore this. A technology that could put Blackwell years ahead in the electric market. He'll move on it, we just need to wait. As if summoned by his confidence, an alert flashed on the computer screen. Someone was accessing the planted files using the surveillance device's connection. Robert immediately contacted his cybersecurity colleague, who confirmed they were tracking the intrusion back to its source. For 15 tense minutes, they watched as Harrison's team methodically downloaded the fake technical specifications. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the connection terminated. Got it, Robert said, hanging up his phone. The access originated from Harrison Industries headquarters, specifically from Thomas Reed's office computer. We've got the digital fingerprints, time-stamped and verified. Olivia exhaled slowly. Is it enough? Robert nodded. Combined with the physical evidence of the surveillance device and Harrison's recorded threat, any prosecutor would take the case. But we need to move fast before they realize the data is worthless. Jack was already reaching for his phone when it rang the same blocked number as before. He answered, putting it on speaker again. You're making a mistake, Harrison. A cold laugh echoed through the line. No, Miller, you made the mistake. Did you really think I wouldn't recognize a trap? I've been in this game since before you wore a uniform. Jack exchanged glances with Olivia and Robert. Then why access the files to prove a point? Harrison's voice hardened. I know exactly what you're doing, and now you should know what I'm capable of. Check your security feeds, the exterior cameras at your daughter's school. Jack felt his blood turn to ice. He quickly pulled up the school's security feed on another monitor, a system he had helped install as part of a community project months ago. What he saw stopped his heart. Thomas Reed, easily recognizable despite his baseball cap, was standing across the street from the elementary school, watching the playground where children were enjoying afternoon recess. Emily wasn't among them. She was safely with Betty, but the message was unmistakable. Harrison's voice continued, smooth as poison. Your daughter isn't there today. How convenient. But the point remains, I can reach anything you care about, Miller. The question is whether your principles are worth that risk. Fury, unlike anything Jack had ever known, surged through him. His voice emerged as a dangerous whisper. If you go near my daughter, there won't be a place on this earth where you can hide from me. Such drama. Harrison sounded almost bored. I have no interest in harming children. I simply want what's mine. Blackwell Motors, the technology Howard stole from me, the market position that should have been my legacy. His voice suddenly intensified. Your little program is irrelevant except as leverage against Olivia. So I'll make this simple. Miss Blackwell withdraws the IPO plans and agrees to sell to me at my original offer, or I will systematically destroy everything you've built, starting with exposing your lead trainer's dirty little secret. Mike's face had gone chalk white, but his voice was steady when he leaned toward the speaker. My name is Michael Reynolds, and I froze for 7 seconds during Operation Shadowfall. I've lived with that guilt every day since. It's not a secret anymore. A long pause followed. When Harrison spoke again, his voice had lost its cultured veneer. You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming. This evidence of yours will never see daylight. My lawyers will bury you in litigation until your grandchildren are old. Your precious program will die in committee meetings and budget reviews. And when you're forgotten, I'll still be here waiting to claim what's mine." The line went dead. Robert was already on his phone alerting officers to Reed's presence at the school. Jack focused on the immediate threat. "I need to get to Emily." He grabbed his keys. Olivia touched his arm. "I'm coming with you." When they arrived at Betty's house, they found Emily happily baking cookies, blissfully unaware of the danger. Jack hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of chocolate and innocence, his resolve hardening, with every beat of her trusting heart against his chest. That night, after Emily was asleep at Robert's house, the safest place Jack could think of, he sat with Olivia on his porch, the weight of Harrison's threats heavy between them. "He won't stop." Olivia stared into the darkness beyond the porch light. "Not until he has what he wants." Jack nodded, decision already crystallizing in his mind. "Then we give it to him. His own trap." The plan they formed that night was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of fighting Harrison through legal channels where his resources could indeed bury them, they would offer him exactly what he wanted: a meeting with Olivia to discuss selling Blackwell Motors. The meeting would take place at the training center with only the key players present. What Harrison wouldn't know was that every word would be broadcast live to the Blackwell board, law enforcement, and select media outlets. Victoria had agreed to arrange the technological aspects, ensuring nothing could be shut down or erased. The invitation went out the next morning, Olivia contacting Harrison directly, her voice conveying defeat and resignation as she suggested meeting to discuss terms. Harrison, predictably confident in his victory, agreed immediately. The 24 hours before the meeting transformed the training center into a technological fortress. Hidden cameras and microphones were installed throughout. Remote backup systems ensured the feed couldn't be interrupted. The veterans took positions throughout the facility, each understanding the stakes went far beyond their individual futures. As the appointed hour approached, Jack found himself standing in the main garage bay, now cleared of vehicles and set up with a simple table and chairs. Olivia waited beside him, outwardly composed, but with tension visible in the set of her shoulders. "Are you ready for this?" He searched her face. She nodded, determination hardening her features. "My father fought him for 20 years. Today we end it." Harrison arrived precisely on time, stepping from a black luxury SUV with the confident stride of a man who believed he'd already won. Thomas Reed flanked him, his prosthetic leg causing the familiar slight limp Jack now recognized from the security footage. Two other men, clearly security personnel, remained by the vehicle. Jack met them at the entrance, maintaining the pretense that this was a legitimate negotiation. "Mr. Harrison, Miss Blackwell is waiting inside." Harrison smiled thinly. "Sergeant Miller. Playing doorman now, I suppose we all must adapt to changing circumstances." Inside, Olivia stood as Harrison entered, her posture straight, her expression carefully neutral. "Victor, thank you for coming." Harrison took in the sparse setting with a dismissive glance. "No lawyers, no board representatives. How informal. I thought we should speak directly." "Given our history," Olivia gestured to the chair across from her. "After all, this negotiation has always been personal, hasn't it?" Harrison settled into the chair with the ease of a man accustomed to power. "Indeed, your father understood that in the end." He offered a cold smile. "I'm pleased to see you've finally accepted reality as well." Jack positioned himself near the wall, watchful but not interfering. Reed stood similarly positioned behind Harrison, his eyes constantly scanning the room with professional paranoia. Olivia opened a folder on the table. "I've prepared a preliminary agreement based on your original offer." Her voice carried just the right note of reluctant surrender. "The board will require some convincing, but with the right incentives." Harrison waved a dismissive hand. "The board will do as they're told once I control the voting shares." His eyes narrowed. "But let's be clear about what this means. The veterans program ends, the IPO is canceled, and you gracefully exit the company your father built." The moment had come. Olivia met his gaze directly. "Before I sign anything, I need to understand one thing. Why you have successful companies, multiple industries. Why this obsession with Blackwell?" Harrison's expression darkened. "Because it should have been mine. Howard and I developed the core technology together. We were partners until he cut me out, claimed my innovations as his own." He built an empire on my work. His voice had lost its polished edge, revealing raw anger beneath. Everything you have should have been my legacy, including sending thugs to threaten women in diners. Olivia's voice remained calm, but her eyes had hardened. Including corporate espionage, including threatening children. Harrison's face tightened. Business requires decisive action. You've played the game poorly, Olivia. Unlike your father, who at least recognized a worthy opponent. A worthy opponent doesn't plant illegal surveillance devices. Olivia slid a photograph across the table, the device Mike had discovered, or use former military contractors to intimidate civilians. Harrison's expression didn't change, but Reed shifted his weight behind him, hand moving slightly toward his jacket. Jack tensed, ready to intervene. Allegations without proof. Harrison pushed the photograph back toward Olivia. Corporate theatrics won't change the outcome today. Either you sign the agreement, or I activate the other options we discussed. Olivia leaned forward. You mean threatening my partner's child? Attempting to blackmail a decorated veteran? Stealing proprietary information? She pressed a button on her phone. I think it's time everyone heard exactly what those other options entail. The garage speakers crackled to life, playing Harrison's previous conversation with Jack. His threats about Emily, his admission about the surveillance, his attempt to use Mike's past against them. Harrison's face transformed as he realized what was happening, rage replacing confidence. What is this? His voice was dangerously quiet. This conversation is being broadcast live to the Blackwell Board, the SEC Enforcement Division, in selected media outlets. Olivia's voice was steady. Everything you've said in this room is now public record. It's over, Victor. Harrison lunged forward, but Jack was faster, moving between him and Olivia. Reed reached inside his jacket, but before he could draw whatever weapon he carried, the garage doors rolled open, revealing Robert and a team of officers. Victor Harrison, you're under arrest for corporate espionage, conspiracy, and making terrorist threats. Robert's voice echoed through the suddenly crowded space. What followed happened with surreal swiftness. Harrison, understanding his position was untenable, attempted to maintain dignity as he was handcuffed. Reed and the security team surrendered without resistance when confronted with overwhelming police presence. Within minutes, the garage that had been the setting for their final confrontation was filled with law enforcement documenting evidence and taking statements. Jack found Olivia standing slightly apart from the chaos, watching as Harrison was led to a police vehicle. It's really over. Her voice held wonder and relief in equal measure. Jack nodded, feeling the weight of weeks of tension finally lifting. Your father would be proud. She turned to him, something vulnerable in her expression. What happens now? With us? Before Jack could answer, Emily's voice rang out as she burst through the door, having convinced Robert's wife to bring her once the danger was past. Daddy, Miss Olivia, did the bad man go to jail? Jack lifted her into his arms, his heart expanding with love and relief. Yes, sweetheart. The bad men are gone. They can't hurt anyone anymore. Emily looked between Jack and Olivia, her young face serious. Does this mean we can be a real family now? Like in my drawing, the question hung in the air between them, innocent yet profound. Jack met Olivia's eyes over Emily's head, seeing in them the same emotion he felt unfurling in his chest, not just relief or triumph, but possibility. The future stretching before them, no longer shadowed by threat, but bright with promise. 6 months later, Jack stood in the doorway of the new national headquarters of the Blackwell Veterans Initiative. The building, located halfway between Oak Ridge and the nearest city, housed training facilities for over 50 veterans, at a time administrative offices and research labs developing adaptive technologies for disabled service members. On the wall behind the reception desk hung a framed children's drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a yellow sun with a big garage in the background. Beneath it, a simple bronze plaque read, "It began with a question, Daddy, can we help her? Let the answer always be yes." The original trainees had all become program leaders. Sarah oversaw technical curriculum development for all centers. Carlos ran community outreach, his natural charisma making him the perfect ambassador for the program. James, despite offers to take larger roles, had chosen to remain at the Oak Ridge Center mentoring new trainees with his quiet wisdom. And Mike, after facing his past publicly, had become the program's most powerful advocate. He spoke openly about his 7 seconds of freezing in combat, about the guilt he'd carried, about finding redemption through helping other veterans rebuild their lives. His honesty transformed what Harrison had intended as a weapon into the program's most compelling testimony. The Blackwell IPO had proceeded as planned, but with a significant difference. 20% of the shares were now held in trust for veterans programs, ensuring that no future corporate maneuver could ever dismantle what they'd built. Olivia approached from behind, slipping her hand into Jack's as they surveyed what they'd built together. The board meeting went well. Full funding approved for the next 5 years. Jack squeezed her hand gently. And Harrison, she shook her head, still fighting the charges from behind bars. His company's in free fall. It turns out his empire wasn't built on much more than fear and intimidation. Jack nodded, turning to face her, still amazed sometimes by the journey that had brought them here. From a chance encounter in a diner to national recognition, from reluctant allies to partners in every sense of the word. Olivia glanced at her watch. We should go. Emily's school play starts in 30 minutes, and she'll never forgive us if we're late. She's very serious about her role as the son. Jack nodded, following Olivia toward the exit. As they passed the reception desk, the newest class of veterans was arriving for orientation. Men and women of various ages, all carrying the invisible weight of service, all seeking a path forward. One young woman with a prosthetic arm caught Jack's eye, her expression a mixture of hope and wariness he recognized all too well. He paused, extending his hand. Jack Miller, welcome to the program. The woman shook his hand, her grip firm despite her obvious nervousness. Andrea Ramirez, Marine Corps. I heard you were a Marine too. Jack nodded. Once a Marine, always a Marine. But here we're all just builders. He gestured toward the training area. We take what's broken and make it stronger than it was before. Andrea's posture relaxed slightly, something like hope flickering in her eyes. I'd like that, to build something again. Jack smiled, recognizing in her the same potential he'd seen in Mike and Sarah in himself when Olivia first appeared at his garage. You will, we all do eventually. That's what this place is really about, not just fixing cars, but remembering how to fix ourselves. Olivia waited patiently by the door, understanding without words why this moment mattered. When Jack finally joined her, she leaned into him slightly. Another life about to change. He nodded, gratitude washing through him as they stepped into the bright afternoon sunlight. It's what we do. Later that evening, they sat on the porch of the cabin, now their family home, watching Emily chase fireflies across the lawn. The future that had once seemed so uncertain now stretched before them with purpose and clarity. Not because all the challenges were gone, but because they'd chosen to face them together. Jack thought back to that night in the diner, to Emily's simple question that had changed everything. He'd taught her that kindness mattered, that helping others was important. But she had taught him something equally profound, that sometimes the most powerful rebuilding begins with the smallest acts of courage. Daddy, can we help her? And they could, and they had, and they would continue to do so. One broken piece, one shattered life, one renewed purpose at a time. Together they walked toward the future they had built, not from grand visions or corporate strategies, but from one simple act of kindness, one child's innocent question, and the understanding that sometimes the most powerful rebuilding happens in the most unexpected places.